So I think we can start the session. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Valérie Rocky, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this session dedicated to circular clean industry and hydrogen. Our societies are facing huge challenges, as you know: climate change, resource scarcity, and energy supply, just to mention a few, that request a transition toward a carbon-free economy with a quick shift from fossil fuels to renewable energies by 2050. Hydrogen is considered a promising technology to support this green transition in several sectors: industry, transportation, buildings, and electricity generation. Today, hydrogen production still has very high carbon emission, but it could be the solution to decarbonize industry, especially hard-to-abate processes, if its production is performed with renewable and low-carbon energy. What are the main innovation pathways so far? What are the scientific bottlenecks? What is the proper regulatory framework to spur the market? What are companies already successfully experienced? To talk about these exciting topics, we welcome today 4 speakers, all experts in their domain. Mr. Laurent Anthony from the Hydrogen Europe Research, Mr. Olivier Lepez from WU, Mr. Joost Sandberg from HYCC, and Mrs. Elvira Luther from Austrian Federal Government. They will bring us different insights from their knowledge and experiences, strong experiences, and then exchange through a roundtable about the main levers to speed up the transition. So we can start. I will invite Mr. Laurent Anthony for the first speech. Laurent Anthony is president of Hydrogen Europe Research, the European Research Association on Hydrogen and Fuel Cells, gathering more than 100 university and research institutes. He is also a member of the governing board of the European Clean Hydrogen Joint Undertaking, president of the Technical Committee of Fuel Cells at the International Electrotechnical Commission, and a national representative in different working groups of international organizations. Mr. Anthony, it's yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Valérie, for this nice introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to start that session on hydrogen. And as you can see on my title, hydrogen can be seen today as really at the service of the environment, of course, but also at the economy. So that's why it's so interesting to work on hydrogen today. The agenda for my presentation today, we are living in a really fast evolving global context. And I would say even after the 24th of February, it's changing even more. But hydrogen still remains quite high at the agenda, or even higher and higher. And at the European level, I will just mention some words about the European Hydrogen Strategy, but also now REPowerEU after the 24th of February. And here we will see also hydrogen has also a new role to play in this REPowerEU. And of course, we all want to develop a European hydrogen industry, but we do not have to forget that research still has to be supported and even have to be enhanced if we want Europe to stay at the front as a front runner in the next 5-10 years. And so you will see some activities we are now doing at the European level on research and innovation before concluding. So why do we speak so much about hydrogen today? Maybe 3 or 5 years ago, maybe some of you, or maybe many of you, even didn't know how to write hydrogen. But now everybody knows hydrogen, is speaking about hydrogen, becomes an expert about hydrogen. So it becomes very trendy. But why? Here you see the IEA report, if we want to achieve the net zero emission by 2050. And the International Energy Agency, IEA, is telling that today we cannot achieve this net zero emission 2050 target if we not consider hydrogen. So hydrogen is not the silver bullet, but it is part of the solution. We need to include hydrogen inside our energy spectra in order to achieve these zero emission and I would say COP21 targets. And here you see the provision of the IEA by 2050. Today we are producing a little less than 100 million tons of hydrogen, so we still are using a lot of hydrogen, but as mentioned by Valerie, using usually mainly fossil fuels. But it may be just multiplied by 6 until 2050 in different, and here what is interesting to see, in different topics. So it can be, of course, refining, but we may use less and less hydrogen in refining as we will have less and less thermal engines and needing less oil or gasoline. But you see that industry content using hydrogen is increasing, but also transport. So transport, industry, but also all the hydrogen derivatives like ammonia or synfuels, because also we are speaking a lot about having e-fuels or synfuels. But you have to know that usually we need to start from renewable and low carbon hydrogen to produce these synfuels. So this is also a good trigger that we have to increase the production of hydrogen, and also buildings, as you can see. And how we will produce that hydrogen. This is the second graph on the right-hand side. As you can see today, mostly using fossil fuels, C-methane reforming or coal gasification. But of course, we need to decarbonize that hydrogen. And you see the picture by 2030, 2050. But what you can see, the blue part, that we will really go to produce hydrogen using electricity. And this means using electrolysis. And to achieve this more than 500 million tons of hydrogen per year, which may represent, depending on the provision, between 13 and 20% of the total energy used in Europe by 2050. Today, we are less than 1%. So you see the really big increase in hydrogen, which is expected in the next decades. So, and also what is interesting to see, now we are moving from momentum to actions. So we were speaking a lot of hydrogen some years ago, but now we as we also say sometimes in Brussels, stop promises, now deliver. And this is exactly the time where we are. We need now to deliver. And this then implies the different actors. First one, also public authorities, and more countries have their own hydrogen strategy. And you will see the increase over the last years and months. Now there are tens of countries having their own hydrogen strategy. And industry is also now really changing scale. And we are really moving from some demonstration project to real deployment and starting to build factories, gigafactories. So we're really moving from demonstration to really scale production and deployment. And of course, nobody can do it alone. And that's why also, if we want to create an international global hydrogen market, we need also to enhance, to facilitate, to encourage international collaboration. And not only at the European level, which is already the case, but also overseas, in Asia, in America, and Africa, everywhere. So, what are the key drivers? The key drivers, of course, we want to produce decarbonized hydrogen. This means to have these environmental benefits, to really fight the climate change. And also energy security is one of the driver, and in particular after the 24th of February this year. And as mentioned also, hydrogen can help also all the energy system resiliency, stability. The more we are integrating renewables, the more we need energy storage to ensure that you will rely on a stable and reliable energy supply. And it has also to be seen as a really nice contributor to the economic growth. It's a new industry. So we are not only working for the environment, but also for the economy by creating a new industry. And creating a new industry implies, of course, to have newcomers, new workers, young researchers, young scientists, young engineers, but also to reskill employers, workforce from declining industries. And this is quite important then to really work on this reskilling of jobs of existing working force. And as mentioned, this is, I would say, what is nice for hydrogen. You can use it for energy, for stationary power, and for transportation. So more or less, wherever you are, you may use and apply the hydrogen vector. But of course, if it would be so easy, we would already have developed hydrogen for many years. So there are some key challenges, and I would just have three main: innovation. Now the main hurdle is how can we bring renewable and low carbon hydrogen at cost acceptable by the market, which means at the same cost as the fossil hydrogen produced and used today. And to do that, we need innovation, research, innovation, and that's what I was mentioning at the beginning. I would say we would never have need as much research as today as the market is starting. So we really need to have this idea. And I like the picture mentioned by Fatih Birol last November when starting the new Clean Hydrogen Partnership. Energy is long-term vision. So energy can be seen as a marathon. So yes, Europe today is leading, but the medals are given at the end of the race. So even if you are one of the first one after 10 kilometers, what matters is that you are still in the three first after the 42 kilometers. And this is why we need research innovation to be ensured that in 10 years, 20 years, we are still leader as Europeans. And then, of course, you may have innovation products, but you need then also to have a regulatory framework which is adapted to the needs. And that's why it's so also important that we also involve all the policymakers in order to ensure that we put in place regulations, codes, standards in order to support the development of hydrogen economy. And this means to give strong and stable policy signals, regulatory certainty, not to have the same experience as in PV some years ago, where you have some public support and then suddenly it stopped and you killed all the business plans. And so you're just killing the trust in all the investors. So we need to avoid to have this again. And market transparency. If we want to support hydrogen, of course, we need to be able to demonstrate that it is good for the economy, but also for the climate and the environment. So we need to be transparent. When we say it's clean hydrogen, we need to be able to demonstrate it is really clean hydrogen to create trust. And finally, as mentioned, to make it happen, we need to have infrastructures. Infrastructures, buildings to produce that hydrogen, to transport the hydrogen to the usage point, and then to adapt all the processes to consume that clean hydrogen. So you see there are quite interesting challenges. So when going back to strategies, as mentioned, we need to involve policymakers. Here you see some pictures. This was the one on your left-hand side in September. There were almost 34 countries having or preparing, finalizing their hydrogen strategy. And in March this year, the latest number I have, 48. So almost 50 countries today have or are finalizing their own hydrogen strategy, which really puts the rules, what the different countries see as the hydrogen future and how it is inside in their energy mix. So this is quite important and gives confidence to industry. Yes, we have the support of policy, but also to investors. They know, yes, it's not a short term, it's a long, medium and long-term vision. And so it's worthwhile to invest in that new industry as we have this policy support. It's really critical. But hydrogen can be produced by many ways. There are many pathways. And I think we really, when we go back to what I was just mentioning, market transparency means that we really have to be able to say what is the main trigger to produce clean hydrogen. It's a carbon footprint. And regarding the carbon footprint of the hydrogen produced, there are different options. And this depends on the country in which you are living. So for some countries, having a lot of natural gas or coal, you may produce low carbon hydrogen by using carbon capture sequestration and usage, CCU or CCUS. In some countries, you also rely on nuclear power, like in France, for instance, but other European countries, or in the US also. And then you may use that decarbonized electricity to produce the low carbon hydrogen. And in other countries, they prefer to invest more or less only in renewable energies. And so that's why you see on this map, you have this blue, green, or in the middle between blue and green. So not all the countries have the same strategy. They have the same target to produce renewable and low carbon hydrogen, but the way to produce that hydrogen depends on your national policy and circumstances. And I think the idea is really to accept that what matters is this carbon footprint. So we need all kinds of electricity or energy which can produce low carbon hydrogen. And I think this is quite key. And that's why low carbon and renewable hydrogen have not to be seen as competitors. They have to be seen as complementary in the next decade or even decades, as it might not be so easy to get rid of all the fossil fuels in the next decade. So this is, I think, quite key. It's the same for battery. Hydrogen is not a competitor of battery. They're complementary. And it's the same between renewable and low carbon hydrogen. And as mentioned, industry is also now really investing in hydrogen. Here you see the latest figure from the Hydrogen Council. They've started, it was in February 2017, 13 CEOs in Davos, starting this Hydrogen Council. Now there are more than 100 CEOs meeting and working on hydrogen. So you see also now a lot of CEOs over the world are now working on this hydrogen. And here you see these all the projects. There were 1 year ago a little more than 200. Now there are, last November, more than 500 large-scale projects. Large-scale means more than 1 gigawatt of electrolyzers project, large-scale demonstration of industrial use or transportation. And what is quite interesting for we as Europeans, you may notice that 50% of the worldwide big projects are in Europe. And sometimes when we are speaking with some US people, they are jealous. Yeah, we should have the most of them in US. No, it is in Europe. So this, we can be quite proud of it, that Europe today is one of the main places of developing this hydrogen economy and hydrogen industry. And that's why it's so important to continue to support industry development research in order to stay in that position. And Hydrogen Council should release in the next couple of months the updated map of these projects. And so what about Europe? 8th of July 2020, so a little less than 2 years ago, the European Commission has released this European hydrogen strategy. It can be seen in 3 phases. The first one, increase production of renewable hydrogen by installing 6 gigawatts of electrolyzers by 2024, and in order to produce 1 million tons of renewable hydrogen. And the idea was first to replace the already consumed hydrogen at the European level. Today we are consuming about 8 to 9 million tons of hydrogen in Europe. So it's part of it. And then by 2030, to increase to 40 gigawatts in Europe, but also 40 gigawatts in addition outside Europe. This was 2 times 40 gigawatts, aiming to produce 2 times 10 million tons outside renewable hydrogen. And here to encourage to have new application, new usage of that hydrogen. And then phase 3 is more or less a redeployment of the hydrogen economy all over Europe. And in order to support that, the European Commission is continuing to support the European research. And this is through the Clean Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. After FCH1, FCH2, now we have this Clean Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. And now there is also this REPowerEU. How can we get rid of this usage of Russian natural gas and oil? So this is really the REPowerEU plan. And here the Commission just doubled the already very challenging targets. We have to move from 10 to 20 million tons of renewable and low carbon hydrogen. Because here the Commission recognized that we will not be able to produce 20 million tons of only renewable hydrogen by 2030, but that we also need to use low carbon hydrogen and in particular nuclear electricity to produce this low carbon hydrogen to achieve this very challenging target, but achievable, but challenging. And REPowerEU, as you can see here on this picture, there are 3 main pillars. Of course, save energy. As we always say, the cleanest energy is the one you are not using. So energy sobriety, energy efficiency, and then diversify our energy sources. And on the top, accelerate clean energy transition. And in this chapter, there is a specific hydrogen accelerator. And here they're mentioning that we need to double the hydrogen production by 2030. But last month, Commissioner Breton signed an MOU with 20 European electrolyzers manufacturers in order really to speed up the production, the gigafactories of electrolyzers in Europe. And the target is to be able to produce more than 17 gigawatt electrolyzers by 2025. 2025 is tomorrow. So it's very challenging, but really industry is committed with the support of the Commission to achieve that very challenging target. And then we also have this important project of common European interest, IPCIs, on hydrogen. And we hope that all the projects will really be notified, at least the first 2 waves in the next weeks. The second wave, the third wave should be before end of summer, by mid of September. And these IPCIs will help the European industry to build gigafactories, in particular for electrolyzers. So this is, you can see IPCI, usually in Brussels we say sometimes it's like play as China, in the way to say that we agree as European Commission that you have member states aid which goes above regular rules. Chinese do not have this kind of questions, they just support. So this is a European way to play almost like that. And also one important point I just want to mention is to increase the hydrogen valleys. I will give some words. Hydrogen valleys could be seen as hydrogen ecosystem. So it can be an island, it can be a big city, it can be a region. How can we ensure that that region can, at the same time, produce, transport, and use clean hydrogen? And to create all the ecosystems from the producers, but also all the supply chain in the suppliers to produce these components. And that's why the European Commission has added 200 million euros in addition to the clean hydrogen joint undertaking to really double the number of valleys in Europe to go from 23 to about 50 by 2025. So research, clean hydrogen joint undertaking. So we were quite happy before. We have FCH1, FCH2, we had 665 million euros for 6 years under H2020. And after negotiation, discussion with the European Commission, now the Commission put 1 billion on the table. And then the private members, Hydrogen Europe industry, you can see here, Hydrogen Europe research, we also signed and committed to add an additional billion. So to have a total of 2 billion euros plus this 2 times 200 millions for the valleys. So the total for the next in Horizon Europe will be a total budget of 2.4 billion euros to develop hydrogen technologies. So we think it's quite interesting. And really this a real collaboration between European Commission, European research, European industry to be very active and reactive. And our main pillars, production. So this is really, if we want to use clean hydrogen, we have to be able to produce massively hydrogen. And that's why it's a big pillar now, production, but after you need also to distribute it and to store it, and in particular underground storage. And in the previous JU, we were more focusing on transportation, but now we are focusing on hydrogen usages, and in particular, you can see here in red, also focus on usage of hydrogen in industry. So before it's more mainly transportation, for transportation, heavy duty transportation, but now we also need to facilitate the usage of the hydrogen in industry and different kind of industries. And of course, all these valleys and cross-cutting and supply chain also in the future. And just to give you the evolution, 10 years ago, we were very happy to start a first electrolyzers with a power of 150 kilowatts. It was 10 years ago. Now, we've already have started at 20 megawatt, and we are building a 100 megawatt. So we changed 2 orders of magnitude in 10 years. And even now there are plans in France with Air Liquide and Siemens to have this 200 megawatt electrolyzer. So we see we changed more than 2 orders of magnitude in 10 years. So cost decreases, power increases. So we are trying to put in place in Europe everything we need in order to have really that industry starting. And as I was mentioning, using hydrogen in industry, so we'll have our 2 next speakers giving some examples of using hydrogen in industry, but I will just give that example of greening the steel. This is this High Future project in Austria, in Linz, where they are developing a 6 megawatt per electrolyzer in order to inject that hydrogen into the coke or oven gas. So to use a little, to green it, I would say, to decarbonize the production of steel making. But the next step will be to go to DRI, to direct reduction of iron ore. But this is then the next step in the next years. And I was just mentioning about these hydrogen valleys. Here you have the 3 first hydrogen valleys funded by the joint undertaking. There are others. As mentioned, in Europe today, we have 23 valleys going on. But these are the three first financed by the European program. The first one was, as you can see, 7 years ago in northern Scotland, using windmills and then to produce that hydrogen, to ship it in different islands, which could be used then either for transportation or for buildings or for heating. And the second one was in northern Netherlands, in Groningen, where they added, for instance, also the underground storage. And the last one started last year in Spain, in Mallorca Island. And here also, we are also, in addition now, to have production not from wind, but from solar, and also to have hydrogen injection into the grid. So you see there are different kinds of valleys. The next one may be to support ecosystems in harbors or in airports. And the idea is really to start this ecosystem approach and then to create a real spillover Europe of these kind of ecosystems. And I was speaking about the JU, the joint undertaking, but this is also quite new. Before, in FP7 or H2020, hydrogen was mainly focused on the FCH joint undertaking. Now you see, hydrogen is almost in many programs. It depends on if it is more on research, on deployment, demonstration. You see, you have many European programs which include now the usage of hydrogen. So I would say the core of development of the building blocks is still the Clean Hydrogen Partnership, but the integration into systems, application in different areas, transportation or industry, is now also supported in other partnerships and in other programs. So that's why, if you're interested in, be careful. Not only look at the Clean Hydrogen JU calls, but you have many opportunities. Innovation Fund and others to deploy the hydrogen technologies, hydrogen brick, or to include the hydrogen bricks into the total energy system. And this is quite interesting to build these synergies at the European level. And you also have the Clean Hydrogen Alliance, has been also created at the same time in July 2020 as the hydrogen strategy has been released. And if you are not already a member of this Clean Hydrogen Alliance, you just have to click on the website by DG GROW and to fill in the form, and you may become member of the Clean Hydrogen Alliance. And the idea of this alliance is to create a hydrogen project pipelines in order to have a whole picture where will we use hydrogen. And if you are validated by DG GROW, this may help you to have some funded projects. And the last number was over 750 projects are included and validated by DG GROW in the database. So this is a way of eligibility criteria if you present some project to have some European fundings. And you see it's more or less all over Europe and all for the different sectors. So in conclusion, not to be too long, I hope I was just in time, what we need to develop hydrogen is the second leg of the energy transition. So it's up to you to say it's the right or the left leg, but it's one of the two legs with electricity of the energy transition. Of course, what we need to support is innovation, research, fundamental research up to demonstration research, to go to deployment, to really work on policy regulation in order to give confidence to the investors, to industry, that now it's time to really invest at scale in this hydrogen vector technology and to deploy it in a long-term vision. And finally also to facilitate these large-scale investments. And we are speaking about tens of billions to be invested in the next decades, which may be seen as very important, but regarding the energy sector, it's just a normal investment. So it's not real challenging if we really believe in that vector. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. We have learned a lot with this interesting overview. We could, for the public, we could ask a question at the end of the session after the round table. And if I understand correctly, Slido tool doesn't work. So it will be with a normal way. The next speaker, it will be Olivier Lepez. Olivier Lepez is working as a Chief Innovation Officer at WOO, a Norwegian group leader in decarbonization and recycling carbon technologies. He's a multi-entrepreneur business leader, capitalizing on 30 years of experience in innovation and the development of industrial and commercial activities in the field of food industry, agrochemistry, carbon recycling, waste valorization, and energy. It's yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This one? Okay. Good morning. So Olivier Lopez. I'm a Chief Innovation Officer at Vaux. As Valérie said, Vaux is a Norwegian listed group, specialist in decarbonization of industries through recycling carbon via pyrolysis processes. So we provide actually a solution to decarbonize energy, and we think about decarbonizing energy through recycling carbon. And of course, the idea is to reduce the carbon footprint and CO2 emission by avoiding using the fossil carbon. We consume roughly 1 billion tons per year of carbon, and a little bit more than 50% is coming from fossil product extraction. So the idea is to say, okay, we have already biomass residue, we have already waste residue. So the idea is if we can recycle the carbon from the biomass and waste, that will be carbon that will not be extracted from fossil, and then we limit the CO2 footprint. So we provide solution in that matter. So basically, our feedstock are forest residues, biomass residues, crops residues, bio-waste, sewage sludge, polymeric residues such as end-of-life tires or waste, or plastic waste. Non-recycling plastic waste, of course. And with our processes, we turn that biomass residues and waste into new form of carbon that can be solid, such as biocarbon, biochar, carbon black, and that we can make materials from that, but also fossil, fuels. But we can also produce carbon as a liquid that can be a substitute of fossil liquid energy. But of course, we can also produce carbon as a gas. And when we produce carbon, we can also produce hydrogen because, as you know, biomass or plastic waste are mainly composed by carbon and hydrogen. So, as we said, we use thermochemical conversion. Thermochemical conversion can be combustion, gasification, or pyrolysis. In our case, we develop pyrolysis process. Pyrolysis is thermochemical conversion that heat the product without oxygen, so it's not a combustion. And because of the heat, we transform the waste and the biomass into new molecules. So, and this transformation is mainly depends on operating conditions that are mainly temperature and residence time. And if you look at the drawing here, you can see that the product that you have at the beginning, which is the biomass or plastic residue or end-of-life tires, is a black one. And then with temperature, you decrease the solid fraction and you increase the gaseous fraction. And if you cool down the gas out of the system, you can condense and get liquid. So with the solid itself, you can recover carbon as a solid that can be used as a biochar, biocarbon, as a filler for plastic or other industries. But you can also collect the liquid, and then the liquid can be what we call a pyrolytic oil. And pyrolytic oil today, for example, can replace naphtha in steam crackers for oil and gas and chemical companies. But then you have also a non-condensable gas, and this gas can be used as a substitute for fossil gas, so it's a gas, natural gas or methane, for example. And this syngas is composed mainly with methane and hydrogen. So of course, the idea here today is that I will try to
explain to you what kind of hydrogen we can extract from biomass residues and waste. For that, we have developed several equipment and processes using pyrolysis. We have a microwave pyrolysis system, and we use already this microwave pyrolysis system in a cruise ship. In a cruise ship, you are talking about 2,000 to 10,000 people. Consumption on a cruise ship is roughly 4 times consumption on land. So you can imagine that in a cruise vessel, you have kind of cities from 10,000 to 40,000 people. And the idea is really to reuse and to recycling the waste and to make energy from that waste. So we have developed already microwave pyrolysis system that is already on board for that kind of ship. But we have also developed electrical heating screw conveyors, which is also, of course, electrical as microwave, but it's another kind of using electricity. This is by Joule effect. And with this equipment, we have already almost 50 units all around the world using this system to do pyrolysis and extract molecules and product from biomass and plastics. But we have also a new system today that are hybrid system, which use not only electricity, but can also work with syngas, which is also renewable energy, to make pyrolysis system in a large scale. And of course, we can also have combination. So here I wanted to show you some example. You will see on the feedstock, we can talk about wood biomass, non-recycling plastic, and end-of-life tires. All of these are very common, and you can find this kind of waste everywhere. Wood biomass is roughly in Europe represent more than 300 million tons. Plastic, if we are talking about PE and PP, is already 10 million tons. End-of-life tires is, of course, much less. We are talking about 3 to 4 million tons. But then you can see the kilogram of hydrogen per ton of feedstock that we can recover. Stoichiometry, so it means you take the hydrogen that is contained into the system only. Theoretically, you can extract 70 kilo of hydrogen per ton of wood biomass, for example. But you can also extract maximum of 140 kilogram of hydrogen per ton of plastic. Don't forget that plastic, if I'm talking about PE and PP, is contain only carbon and hydrogen. Of course, we have additive, like flame retardant, plastifiant, and other component, but mainly polyolefins are composed by carbon and hydrogen. The idea is with pyrolysis, with temperature, you can separate and get carbon from one side and hydrogen from the other side. Today we have already several programs on progress, and you can see some results that we have already achieved in terms of how many kilogram of hydrogen we can extract from per ton of biomass. But what is also important is the energy. This is the efficiency in terms of transformation. But of course, what counts is how much electricity you put in the system. And here you can see that on wood biomass, for example, we use 14 kilowatt hour per kilo of hydrogen, 6 kilowatt hour per kilo of hydrogen from plastic, and 37 kilowatt hour per kilogram of hydrogen from end-of-life tires. But when you use the syngas and you extract hydrogen, you also recover part of the syngas, which is not hydrogen. And I was talking to you about methane, but from biomass, we can also have carbon monoxide. This off-gas contains energy. So if we want to produce electricity from that syngas, from that off-gas, we can also produce electricity in the same time as we produce hydrogen. Of course, because if we produce electricity in a gas engine from that off-gas, we will also emit CO2. So this means we have also to take care about that. But theoretically, producing hydrogen from feedstock could be a very interesting way in terms of energy efficiency. Of course, we are talking about biomass, we are talking about plastic, we are talking about tires. So it's not pure hydrogen, but we have byproduct. Byproduct, mainly for wood biomass, is biocarbon or pyrocarbon. The demand from for pyrocarbon today or biocarbon that can be active carbon is a huge market of 16 billion tons, and today still growing roughly 5% per year. Pyrolytic oil from plastic as a byproduct is very well used today as a replacement of naphtha in steam cracker for oil and gas and chemical industries. Recycling carbon black from tires is already used, and we have already plant doing pyrolysis of end-of-life tire to recover carbon black. As it was mentioned, the color of the hydrogen count today, you can have yellow hydrogen, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen, green hydrogen. So I give you some example about the color of the hydrogen that will be produced by this kind of feedstock. As a concluding remark, and because it's a session for hydrogen production, green hydrogen or low carbon hydrogen, as it was mentioned by Laurent, we think that pyrolysis is a valuable and energy efficient complementary technology to produce hydrogen. As it was mentioning before, if the target is to produce 20 million tons of hydrogen by 2030, any possibility to produce hydrogen for many feedstock in different, with different kind of technology can be considered. So using non-recycling waste as feedstock to produce hydrogen can contribute first to solve problem of pollution of those waste, because we have to do something also with plastic waste, with biomass, with sewage sludge, with end-of-life tires. So it can solve a problem in the meantime as it can produce hydrogen. Of course, that solution can enhance carbon recycling into fuels, chemicals, and materials that will avoid new CO2 emission. We will, of course, generate neutralize CO2 emission because of renewable if we are talking about biomass, or recycling if we are talking about polymers. And we can also think about using waste as a feedstock because it can also be a solution to reduce power consumption when producing hydrogen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez, for this interesting presentation. So another industrial experiences example, Mr. Joost Sandberg. Joost Sandberg is commercial director at HYCC and responsible for building for business in green hydrogen and circular carbon. He has over 16 years of experience in the energy sector in strategy, business development and renewable energy sourcing within several companies such as RWE, AkzoNobel, Nouryon and Nobian. He is actively pursuing and driving opportunities in green hydrogen and circular chemistry with his team, resulting in a strong international project business development portfolio. It's yours.
Thank you very much. Indeed. My name is Joost Sandberg. I work for HYCC. New kid on the block, I would say. I will stand here. Sorry. HYCC, new kid on the block. We take the electrochemical experience from Nobian, over 100 years of electrochemical experience, and we combine that with the financial firepower of our other shareholder, Macquarie, that is 50% shareholder through the Green Investment Group. And the story already says it, the Green Investment Group. So what we as HYCC endeavor is to scale up green hydrogen. Today, I will tell you about a first step that is being taken in Europe by a European consortium on Joules. Laurent already introduced a bit about it, and I will elaborate because it seems so easy, but in reality it is not, unfortunately. But we have very strong partners, and I think that's the key of making these early demonstrators work. It's finding the right partners to get it across the finish line. So we work with Gasunie, the Dutch-based TSO, gas TSO, with French McPhy, developing innovative electrolysis technology together with De Nora, the Italian expert, I would say, in electrolyzers, electrodes. Initio, a company that we worked with for a long time to certify hydrogen, so being transparent in what that hydrogen actually is, carbon footprint, what is the renewable source, and BioMCN, the largest biomethanol producer in Europe that is also looking for a new decarbonized way of producing methanol. Because if we look back and we look at this from an industrial perspective, we see the energy transition making very big steps. I think if we look at where the cost of renewable power specifically has gone, it's tremendous success. However, we are now facing the next challenge, which will be, I think, even bigger, how to decarbonize industries. Because if you look around us, everything has been built. So decarbonizing the world is not really what we want, because there's actually a lot of carbon around us. We want to make it carbon neutral. We still want to fly. I think a lot of people here actually flew in for this conference, and we want to have our freedom to continue to do that. We also want to make the materials around us, isolate our homes. So we need to make those materials, but on a carbon neutral way. Green hydrogen offers a fantastic opportunity to do that. I think that was already stressed before. Our view as HyCC and the partners in the Joules consortium was really to use the chemical industry to get scale. Because when we need to develop this market, when we need to develop the technologies, we do need to go to scale. So where is the scale? At the current hydrogen uses. So indeed, go there, replace current fossil hydrogen, and you are able to get to scale. That's what we've been doing together in a new value chain. Looks very simple. It's renewable power that breaks down hydrogen in hydrogen and oxygen. Very simple. Then you have a simple hydrogen molecule and you have CO2, and together they produce methanol and water. From a chemical side, it's not too complicated. But to establish such a value chain, we've been doing this for the last 2.5 years, is not easy. Not at all, unfortunately. But that's what we wanted to do with Joules. We wanted to show that it is possible. And yes, if you work together with the right partners, these kind of projects are possible. When we realize Joules, and we aim to take the first shovel in the ground after summer, we will have a 20 megawatt electrolyzer in Delfzijl, delivering hydrogen into industries. That will be, 20 megawatts is the largest scale in Europe. That's a bit far off where we need to be, right? We need to go at gigawatt scale. So while we take important steps, I think it's always good to caution everybody. Yes, we have the really big steps to take, but be aware there is technology that needs to be developed. It is important. We need to continue to develop the technology. And in this consortium, it's European technology, because we have looked around the globe for suppliers. My firm belief, currently as Europe, we are leading. Yeah, but other continents will catch up fast if we not move. So it's important that we move and show European state-of-the-art technology on the ground. I think that's very important. That's very important. And we're therefore very happy that we receive support from various governments, from the European Committee, through the FCHJU, from the Dutch government, and from the region in the North Netherlands, the Waddenfonds. So we do see that in this development, it's not only private parties that need to work together, but it's also the cooperation with public partners. We do this at the Chemical Park Delfzijl. The potential of that chemical park is towards 1 gigawatt. So that really shows what advantages you have if you start to develop near chemicals. You can grow significantly. Here we show the location of the Joulz 1 next to actually the Nobion's chloralkali plant. That's already 30 megawatts, that's where chloralkali is. But also scale up that we have and developing towards Sky Energy, which is sustainable aviation fuel. So in such a chemical park, capturing the synergies of post-production and offtake is very important to get to scale. But the most important thing around it is, and this relates to the Hydrogen Valley, is that if we get to that scale, you get to make hydrogen available at lower cost. And what that does is that you are able to demonstrate hydrogen in different applications. I think it was mentioned, but in North Netherlands, Hydrogen Valley, heaven, and you can watch the movie at home, please do, because there are activities on all applications of hydrogen. Hydrogen for heating, hydrogen for mobility, and mobility in trucks, in ships, cars obviously, but also storage, large-scale storage in caverns. It's really that ecosystem that's being built around the large scale that industry can deliver. I think that's what makes the Hydrogen Valley in North Netherlands quite unique. And I think what we've done so far, and I think a lesson is we got started a couple of years ago with good partners, and we're still trying very hard, yeah, because it's not easy. And that's why we want to, share some lessons learned on what we have done in the last 2.5 years. First of all, in this value chain, ultimately we're taking renewable power and making renewable methanol. It's a completely new product, and there's new regulations around that. A delegated act, some people may know it. It's taken a bit of time to get to where we are now, right? Ultimately, I think if we look at when the final delegated act will be there, there's roughly a year delay. That is difficult for industries to develop if the regulations take so much time to develop. And important in that is if you look at industries, investment cycles are 20, 30 years, right? So we need a regulatory framework to have certainty when the next investment decisions are being made. Very, very important. Investment cycle times are way longer than 4 years of political time. Yeah? Please take the complete value chain into account. I've painted the value chain in Joulz. It's not that complicated. It's power, it's an electrolyzer, and it's a methanol producer. But on a regulatory side, those are completely different worlds. It is very, very difficult to tie these things together. Yeah? So I think that's very important. If it looks simple, it should be simple to implement. Yeah. If we look at the current delegated act that is aimed at supporting an emerging market, there is a lot of details and requirements. That is difficult because we're in an emerging market with parties finding new places in the value chains, new risks being introduced, very difficult to manage that if it's completely sealed off with the regulations. Yeah, so there are now some developments where there is a grandfathering scheme, which I think is important but should be extended. Why? This is experimental time. You can't fully regulate an experimental and developing market. Not possible. The last one. This is one example, but there should be more examples. Please keep stimulating that. The only way that we will show the potential of green hydrogen and its uses in industry and learn from it is if we do it. Yeah? What we learned in the last 2.5 years on establishing a value chain, de-risking the technology, improving the technology, assessing how we can use that flexible hydrogen in a industrial system is not something we learned on paper, it's learned by doing. Yeah, so it's important that we keep showing demonstrators. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sternberg. Now we welcome the last speaker, Mrs. Elvira Luther. Elvira Luther is a business economist with more than 20 years of professional experience in the energy sector, currently working as program manager for the Climate and Energy Fund of the Austrian federal government. She is responsible for the conceptual design of the Mission Innovation Net Zero Industry Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I start with what is mission innovation. And on the first slide you will see a picture. It was happening in France in the year 2021 at the COP, and 2015 at the COP21, and it was the governmental response to the Breakthrough Energy Coalition, funded by, I call it, Billionaires Club, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and so on. And both have the aim to increase the funds for research and innovation on clean energy technologies. What is mission innovation? Now it's a global intergovernmental initiative, 22 countries on 5 continents, plus the European Commission. And they want, let's say, to increase public funds for clean energy innovation. Last year in June, they started, to show you a figure, I almost forgot. Since the foundation, they could increase the public investment of the member states by around 5 billion euros per year in clean energy technologies. After this success, they started last year in June the second phase, and they want to, let's say, invent new public-private innovation alliances, so-called missions. 6 missions already started, with a very high involvement of European member states and or the European Union. The one is carbon dioxide removal, then clean hydrogen with involvement of European Union, green power future led by Italy, integrated biorefineries with the Netherlands as co-lead, urban transition, also co-lead European Union, and the net zero emission shipping initiative co-led by Denmark. And the one I'm talking about is the Net Zero Industry Mission. It was announced at COP26, but not officially launched yet. This will happen hopefully in September this year. And for you to understand, let's say, what missions have to do, go back. Let's say they have to solve a major energy problem in the medium term, meaning in 10 years, around 2030. And there should be a voluntary coalition between governments, investors, companies, and research institutes. And why we wanted, let's say, a reason why we have now developed this net zero industry mission is, let's say, the International Energy Agency. They did a publication on clean energy innovation, and there, let's say, they call it at around 2030, there's a once-in-a-generation opportunity in the heavy industry for decarbonization. Because at around 2030, the life cycle of the plants is ending. There's starting a new refurbishment cycle. And if we don't use this window opportunity, let's say we continue with the available technologies. So it's very urgent to have, in 8 years, more or less, innovation technologies which are not available yet at commercial scale, ready for demonstration and to showcase that it's working. And if we succeed in doing this, we can save around 60 gigatons of CO2. If we don't succeed, but we have to meet the Paris targets, industry will be most probably forced to do investment during the next life cycle, meaning they need additional money for this, and this, let's say, it's a lost opportunity. And exactly the aim of this net zero industry mission is to avoid this. We want to ensure by 2030 that there's a suite of technical solutions available that are sufficiently proven to facilitate the full decarbonization of heavy industries in multiple regions of the world by 2050. Meaning focus is on iron and steel, cement and chemical sector, but we also include the other energy-intensive industry, meaning what we call the other high-temperature heat users. The status of the coalition is it's currently led by Austria together with Australia. And as core members, we have the European Union, China, Germany, Finland, and the UK. And what do we want to do? To support by 2030 the implementation across the world of large-scale demonstration projects for each innovation field and sector. You know better than I do that there are already in, let's say, hydrogen-based green steel demonstration plants on the way. For example, the hybrid plant in Sweden, Salcos in Germany, or HYFO in Austria. But the aim is, as already the speakers before mentioned, it's necessary to learn for other companies and countries how this first-time full-scale demonstration is working in order to make not the same mistakes again and not to lose money. Then we need fast-track development from lower tier levels to tier level 8, because we all know that with the large-scale demonstration plants, it's not ended. We don't know now how 100% carbon neutral economy will work. And for sure, we will need further technologies to reach this aim. And yes, economy, always important. Another aim, the last aim, is to reduce by more than 15% the capital expenditures of these new technologies. This year in January started, let's say, with the work we call a research and innovation roadmap, and developed 7 pathways. And they were evaluated by the global expert. And what you can see that the use of clean hydrogen in energy-intensive industry is the top number 1 where innovation is needed. Above all in chemicals, as feedstock, and in iron and steel sector a substitute for the reaction agent. On place number 2 is the alternative materials and more energy efficient processes. Very important for the cement sector. The third one is the so-called circular economy approach with materials efficiency and waste valorization. And on top number 4 is CCU and CCS. And this paper is available on the website of the Mission Innovation, and for public consultation is open until the end of this week. And if you have input, more than welcome. And as, let's say, Mission Innovation Net Zero Industry is not yet officially launched and don't have conclusions, because we didn't start work officially, but I have 5 theses for industrial decarbonization with clean hydrogen. The one is, you've seen it before, it's the number 1 priority for climate neutrality in heavy industry worldwide. What is very important is infrastructure development, both gas and electricity grids, in order to bring the clean electricity and or hydrogen to industrial production sites. For you, just one example. Because one example is, in Austria, if for the environmental procedure to get approval for the plant, it takes for these huge industrial projects up to 15 years, meaning if we want to reach the 2030 targets, if it did not apply yet, it's not possible. Then we need timely and sufficient availability of clean hydrogen at reasonable prices in order to keep the EU industry competitive. Another example from Austria, if we want to decarbonize voestalpine, the Austrian iron and steel manufacturer, they would need the installed capacity of the whole of all the hydropower plants along the Danube. And you know that Austria is having a lot of electricity from hydropower. And we have still chemical sector which needs to be decarbonized. And so they need additional electricity for the decarbonization. Research and innovation is the backbone of the industrial decarbonization because we don't have the technologies yet, and because Mission Innovation, international cooperation is necessary. As the speakers mentioned before, we have to share the high development risk, learn from each other, and it's also a challenge on a global level. And that I end with one example from Europe where let's say, how it could work. It's the so-called Linz-Donawitz process, let's say resource-efficient steel production. It was invented in the 1930s in Switzerland. The first steel plant at scale was constructed in Austria in 1950, and at around around 70% of the whole steel production worldwide was based on this Linz-Donawitz process. So, and then the company receives also a lot of money from the licenses. So this is why we need international cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our speakers for this exciting and very insightful presentation, highlighting the main challenges to address if you want hydrogen technologies to become an important part of our energy solution. Now, I invite my speaker to join the round table and deepen some points with them. Thank you. So my first question will be about, so I need to, my paper will be about the main lever What main levers do you consider crucial to increase hydrogen production by 2030? Who wants to begin with these questions?
I can start.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
It's more or less what I said before on my
Yes,
5 theses. We need enough clean electricity, infrastructure, and also, let's say, the production of electrolyzers. Because if we don't have the electrolyzers, we cannot produce the amount of hydrogen we need. Nothing to add.
Yeah, from my side, I think the key part is to start now, because we can study and we can make plans and we can do research. I like research, but we need to start now.
Yes, I
Anthony?
think I'm just in full agreement with what has been said. We have to start
We are-
now, but as mentioned, we need to put, and this is what you mentioned, just we need to put in place regulation in order to allow it. And here, if we want to be able to produce a lot of hydrogen, I think one thing was, of course, to rely on production of electrolyzers, to have storage capacity, because if you produce, you may not use it directly, so you need also huge storage capacities. But maybe one really important thing is how can we facilitate permittings? So it's one thing to produce, but it's another thing to install. And you mentioned it might be easy on the paper, but not as such in reality to make it work. But maybe one big hurdle are the regulations. When will you be allowed? How fast are your projects, your requests be answered by public authorities? Yes, you are allowed to operate your electrolyzer. And this is something I think if we really want to have massive production of hydrogen by 2030, we have to see how can we facilitate permittings, but of course, without changing any rules regarding safety. So, safety is no discussion, but how can we speed up these facilities and permittings?
Mr. Lopez, do you want to react?
No, I absolutely agree. Permitting is one of our main problems, really, in France. Of course, I guess it depends on countries, but yes, we are facing a lot of issues for permitting. I mean, we need to have the right to experiment. We need to have the right to start, as it said. If we want to have mature technology, and we were talking about TRL 8, we need to go first by TRL 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. So it means we need to have the possibility to make demonstration systems. So we have already issues with technology, which is not easy, but then we have also to fight with administration. Yeah.
Maybe one point to add is also the public acceptance, because energy transition is sort of an industrial revolution, and we know yet that for these infrastructural projects, sometimes or very often people don't accept it, and it takes a long time to get an approval, also apart from the, let's say, legal things. And so to have youth organizations, also environmental organizations on board, and inform them what is the advantage and if we do this, let's say, new technologies, hydrogen innovation or hydrogen as an energy carrier, and also inform them what would be the alternatives, because the alternatives is the existing system. So yes, have them on board would be very important.
I like to add on that, because I think it's very important. And I think that stresses the, I think, recognized need for the hydrogen valleys. An example we have, and we're actually very proud of as the Jules project, is we started in the North Netherlands years ago using byproduct hydrogen from the Nobian's chlor-alkali plant already run buses. Now, those are not big volumes, it's not, technology works, right? So we don't need to demonstrate it. But that made it in the wider region very acceptable, the use of hydrogen. We have the irrevocable permits for Jules now. 0 complaints. 0. People knew hydrogen. They knew what it was about. Yes, it was safely behind a fence at a chemical park, right? So it's safe. But at the same time, it wasn't tucked away behind the fence, because that is also what you can do. If you do it safely, you're away. People don't see it. They recognized what hydrogen is. They saw it. There were buses. They were silent, clean, and most importantly, they worked. That was the comments on the buses. Yeah, well, they work. Perfect. So it is really why I really think that the European Committee with Hydrogen Valleys is supporting doing a great job making hydrogen visible to the public, because then they know what it is. And that really helps in permitting. Even though procedures are not easy, it still helps.
I may just add regarding hydrogen valleys, and I was mentioning REPowerEU, but Commissioner Gabriel mentioned that. And as you mentioned, people have to see hydrogen as a reality, and that's why when we're mentioning to double the number of hydrogen valleys, one of the targets of the European Commission is to have at least one hydrogen valley in each member state. So this is important to be inclusive, not only to have hydrogen valleys on the eastern side, on the western side of Europe, but also on the central and eastern side of Europe, so that all member states have their own valley, and this may help to develop acceptance, but also all the industry behind suppliers in order to develop that hydrogen economy. So this is really why European Commission is really pushing to have this ecosystem, but everywhere.
Thank you. Comment? No? It's okay. So, yes, you want to?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned some of the difficulties and specifications that are in the emerging hydrogen regulations. And you mentioned the grandfather clause that will prevent these from being applied to the first movers. What should companies and researchers do today in order to help support removing these unnecessary specifications? What can we do to defend ourselves against these specifications if they're making the emergence of hydrogen more difficult?
I think the consultation period just ended, so hopefully everybody has made that point officially as well. No, I think the key point is that we should be, at least from an industrial perspective, be open that we don't get it perfect right at now, but we strive to get it more better every time. I think that the key challenge is that I don't mind that at some point we need to be produce hydrogen at the same time as a new wind park is producing the renewable power. That's fine. We'll get there. No problem. I think that, and that's also, I think, something really embedded in scientific life, is you are transparent and you try to do it better every time. I think that's important, that we're open on where we need to go, but that we are also open to, say, this just doesn't work. If you are so strict on every requirement, we don't get this first 20 megawatt, 100 megawatt to work. Now, what do we find more important? That we get it to work and we learn, or that it's perfect from day one? I think that's where we should be more open about, also as industry, say, look, we're trying to do our best, but this just doesn't work yet. But I think as also as science, show how from today you can get to tomorrow, and what are the steps to get there. Yes.
Yes, I may also just react about, as you mentioned, this delegated act of RED II. That's just public consultation has finished last week. And I think we might be quite disappointed as hydrogen community to see, as you mentioned, all these additional constraints which have been pushed on hydrogen, but not on other energy vectors. And so I think we should really ensure technology neutrality. which usually Commission is promoting everywhere, but unfortunately not in that case. To put this additionality, to put the constraint on financial support, for instance, is not asked for other energy vectors. So at the same time, we want to double the production of renewable and low carbon hydrogen, but on the other side, we are putting additional constraints to avoid achieving these targets. So you may be, I would say, more or less happy with the grandfathering clause. I'm not. I would say, why have we to put this additionality constraint for hydrogen when not for the others? So I hope that Commission will read all our comments and to really agree to have this technology neutrality and consider hydrogen as electricity, as gas, as heat on the same, as a real level playing field. And unfortunately for us, it's not the case. And that's the same for the carbon footprint. We were speaking about market transparency to create confidence, to promote social acceptance. But unfortunately, it is not the case, neither that in this delegated act, where we are not considering renewable and low carbon hydrogen in the same level playing field. In one case, we are not taking into account, I would say, indirect emissions, but in other, yes. So we have to be either we count the same system boundary for all or for none. But we cannot say half of the energy is clean, but the other half is not clean. And this just may create or kill trust in these new technologies. And I think this is exactly what we should avoid. And I hope that now, with all our comments, the Commission will maybe adapt these delegated act in order to achieve what I just mentioned, is really transparency, technology neutrality, in order to really to support what we may achieve our targets.
I have a question.
Okay, thank you. That's related to the talk regarding mission innovation. So it's very appealing to see this effort at the global scale around this competitive, clean industries and so forth. Yet I'm wondering, in such international cooperation scheme, how we can safeguard our interest at the EU and member states level, yet being part of this, international cooperation. In practice, or does it work, or do you see that?
You mean the IPR rights, is it?
Yeah,
yes.
Right.
Our proposal is that IPR rights always solved on a project level. And regarding publication, what they have to publish, we would say more or less what has to be done for the EU Innovation Fund, because they also have to do sort of publication that people know which projects are going on and who is doing it. So have, let's say, a minimum amount of information available, but IPRs only up to the projects. And we don't want to interfere on this. And the EU Innovation Fund, let's say, they had a very intensive process, and I think if we follow this approach, it should work out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I come from Fukushima, Japan. So I felt a little bit lonely after listening your presentation, because nobody concerned about Japan. Okay, so I'd like to ask you, which domain are you interested in if you think about the collaboration with Japan in the near future in hydrogen region?
Maybe I can. We have, for us, though, we have collaboration already with Japan in different sectors. The biggest one is on turning seawater sludge in biocoal for coal power plant to decarbonize electricity with Kobelco. And we have also project now with also a big Japanese corporation to turn plastic waste into hydrogen.
I think personally I think Japan is very big in methanol, ammonia trading and shipping. I think those are definitely vectors which will benefit also Europe and Japan vice versa. Obviously we're developing international supply chains for hydrogen. I think that's definitely an area where Europe and Japan need to work together. Definitely if we're shipping methanol, that needs to be safe. Or ammonia, especially. I think that's a key area. Also on electrolysis. Personally, we know Asahi Kasei very well from Nobian chlor-alkali history. I think definitely on the electrolysis development there are definitely areas where Japan and Europe should work more closely together, in my view.
And maybe I may just add on this more institutional collaboration. If we want to create a global hydrogen market, there are different international organizations, and I would just mention the International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Economy, IPHE. This is an intergovernmental partnership, 22 countries, plus the European Commission, in order to agree common rules, to agree on common standards, which may become regulations afterwards. And here we have direct discussions between METI, with the European Commission, with the different member states' governments. Just for instance, we have two task force on that. The one is what are the current trades, the trade rules on hydrogen, and how can we just map it and see what could be common or commonly agreed. And the second one is on the methodology of calculating the carbon footprint. If everyone speaks about certificates or guarantees of origin, but the first step is that we need to agree commonly at the global scale, how are you calculating that carbon footprint? And IPHE has a specific task force on that, and here we have experts from Japan, from Europe, from all the 20 countries discussing and trying to find the international consensus, which then will, and this is something we are aiming at, to become an international standard. So it's not, I would say, directly linked with industry, but as you mentioned, it's also, as mentioned before, important that we not only have European regulations, Japanese regulations, US regulations, but really commonly agreed approaches in order to find a global consensus, which will then facilitate the real creation of a global market.
Thank you. If you want to stop at on time, we have to stop the session now. And I would like to thank very much our speaker. You can upload them, of course. Thank you very much.
Yes, I have a meeting at 5.